All right. Great. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sarah Sterling. I'm the program catalyst for conveners.org, and I am also joined here with my colleague, Colin Eddy from also conveners.org. And we are going to guide you through this behind the curtain call talking about our Accelerating the Accelerators event that we hosted back in August. And just go over everything from, the history of the program, how we developed it for a virtual context this year. It's the very first time we've ever done this virtually. And this is a great case study, we believe, of how to host a multi-day virtual convening with little resources and staff. So we want this to be an engaging call. Feel free, since we're a smaller group, to just unmute or even put in the chat, and Colin will be helping me to gather questions. Or if you also have had similar events that you've put on, we'd love to hear from you as well as we look at even 2022 and developing the next iteration of this event, which will most likely be virtual. But before we get started, I'd love to get us connected and just talking with one another. We're going to do, it's up to Colin, basically, if we do this in a large group or small groups, but we're going to do a little community connection time here. And I see that Greg is just joining us. So I'm going to stop my screen share for a second. And Colin, what do you think? Should we just do a group share here just to get connected really quickly?
Yeah, I think we probably have time for that today anyway, so.
Okay, great. So the prompt for today, and we always try and do some sort of community connection at the beginning of all of our calls, just as a reference for you all. But our prompt today, in the spirit of it being fall season, is what is your favorite smell? And what memories does that smell invoke? And I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds just to think about your favorite smell. And I'm going to push you to think beyond coffee. So coffee is off the table as a favorite smell, because I'm sure it's a favorite smell for a lot of us, or like a tea type of smell. Ashley sharing in the chat. And actually, Ashley, if you want to kick us off and talk about your favorite smell of dirt and leaves, just unmute yourself. That would be great. I'm going to call on you first. Thanks for sharing the chat as well.
You're welcome. Yeah, I would say like dirt and leaves, which reminds me of like that wet smell when you rake them and you jump in the pile as a kid. So that's awesome. What I think.
That's great. And Ashley, if you want to popcorn it to someone and just pass it, feel free.
I will say Abby Schwalb. Hope I said that right.
Pronunciation, that's impressive. Nice work. Thank you. My favorite smell, I would say, realistically, my favorite smell is like the baked goods, but I think that's aligned with coffee, where everyone just loves the smell of bread and cookies. So I'm not going to say that. I would say mine is fresh foraged mushrooms, because I love foraging for mushrooms. So when you're walking in the forest and you have a basket of mushrooms, it like wafts, and you can you're like, oh, are they out? I smell them. Oh no, it's the basket that I'm holding full of mushrooms. That's what I'm smelling. But it just reminds me of this time of year. So yeah. I will popcorn it over to Monica.
Hey everyone. So in the spirit of food smells, and I apologize in advance, it would be Old Bay seasoning. It reminds me of growing up in Maryland. It reminds me of summers and family time. So every time I get that smell of Old Bay, it gives me a feeling of nostalgia. And I will popcorn over to Brett.
Thanks, Monica. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go with, in the East Coast of the United States, there's this kind of smell that comes with spring when things kind of hit this certain temperature. And it's really good. But since Monica referenced Maryland, I'm going to say the honeysuckle too. So I used to live in Baltimore, and you'd smell that honeysuckle for like 2 weeks. It's unbelievable. And I will popcorn to Colin.
I think mine would be the smell of salt water. I live on an island. I can see the ocean from the top floor of my house. And for me, when I travel, I travel to a lot of places that don't have ocean near them. And then, you come home, and as soon as you step off the plane here, you can smell the salt water, and it just kind of reminds you of being home. I will give it to Pilar.
Well, I just was going to say the same. I live by the seashore. I live in Lima, and I love the how the sea smells. No, it gives me peace. And I will pop to Christy.
Yeah. So my favorite smell from this time of year is probably like cooking onions and leek. So our family dish is leek potato soup. And so just like the smell of like caramelizing onions is really it for me. I will pass it over to Jana.
Sorry about that. Yeah, ironic that the prompt for this was because of the time of year. My favorite smell by far is the smell of burning leaves. There was where I grew up that had for a while a wooden playground set, and so the smell of burning leaves was sort of in that playground set, no matter what time of year it was, whether there were actually leaves burning or not. But definitely it's a scent that reminds me of fall. And then because of that association, also a scent that reminds me of my childhood. Okay, so trying to remember who hasn't gone yet. Red Pony, have you gone?
Nope.
Yes.
All right, passing it to you.
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, definitely time of year context, but apple orchard, picking apples, pressing apple cider, baking apple pie, and we're doing all of that right now. The house is full of apple smell. The orchard itself is a couple miles away and wonderful. So for me at the moment, at least, that's what's up. So let's see, Marty, did Marty go?
Not yet. Let's see if Marty can participate because they're joining on their phone. Let's see. And if not, Greg, have you gone? I don't believe you've gone yet, have you?
Nope, not yet. Happy to hop in here. Yeah, such a wonderful prompt. Just personally, quickly, like smells are so important to me, and I have dozens of smells to choose from that bring back different memories. So anyways, just really wonderful prompt. And one came to mind that was recent. I was recently had the opportunity to go camping, and just that smell of pine needles during this time of year, but also for anybody who's kind of gone camping during or hiking during warmer seasons, there's really an inexplicable smell in the forest when there's when it's warm and a gust passes through, and it's kind of pine needles plus just everything, all the other smells in the forest. Really can't put my finger on it, but whenever that smell hits my nose, it just kind of is meditative and transports me. So thanks so much for that prompt again.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Thank you everyone for sharing. And mine really quickly, I mean, I +1 to all of your smells. And I'm going to go the route of Monica, but I love like the pumpkin spice smell. That just transports me to my favorite time of year, which is fall, and just, Thanksgiving and friends and family getting together and food. So it goes above and beyond just the pumpkin spice latte craze that I'm definitely a part of, but it's like a whole seasonal smell for me. So thank you all so much for sharing. Marty, you're joining us really quickly. Do you want to share your favorite smell? I know you're back.
Sure. I guess one thing that reminds me of the holidays is we used to have these big red bayberry candles, and that sort of mixed in with like the smells of pies and leaves and all that. Sorry, I was just switching to my laptop, and my Wi-Fi is not doing so good today.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm going to go back ahead and share my screen, and we'll get the call kicked off again. Any questions that you guys have as they come up, feel free to unmute since we are a smaller group. And we'd love to hear just like your experiences as well as we move through the presentation. So I'm just going to minimize this so I can see the screen. All right, so Accelerating the Accelerators, just for those of you who might not be so familiar with the event itself, I wanted to give a little bit of a historical perspective because what we did this year was so different from past years. So this is an event that we have done ever since, almost since the beginning of conveners.org as an organization itself. It's always been an in-person event in the past. And our partners for that event, in-person event, were SoCap and Miller Center. It was definitely more of a niche, curated event, very much smaller than the virtual event that we had this year. And we do what's called an unconference model. So what we do is when we're meeting all together at SoCap, because it usually takes place the day before the first day, depending on how SoCap schedule works, at Fort Mason Center, we meet in our own area, and we don't have an agenda necessarily. We have a couple of people that we've kind of tapped that are highly engaged, highly participatory, but we kind of talk as a group and identify main challenges or questions that people have and put them up on different pieces of paper and kind of do a gallery walk, and people vote based off of the projects or challenges that they're most interested in. And that kind of creates the agenda for the all-day event. So that's what we've done in the past, looking back. And that has sort of informed a little bit about what we were doing for our virtual event. So the main theme for our event, which I'll go into in a little bit, was Thriving Forward. So Accelerating the Accelerators, AA, Thriving Forward. And with this theme, we really wanted to focus on, especially because, you know, COVID has hit everyone super hard, but I would say, at least in our experience in our work, especially social entrepreneurs and the organizations that support them. And so Accelerating the Accelerators has always been focused on working with organizations that have a focus around impact and working with entrepreneurs in some way, shape, or form. So this could be, I mean, in the past, it has been more accelerator incubators. But this year we really wanted to open it up and broaden the audience to all types of entrepreneur support organizations, or ESOs as we call them. And we really wanted to focus on how do we help one another really thrive instead of survive. So get out of the survival mode that I think a lot of us have been in during COVID and get more towards a thriving ecosystem. And so with that theme in mind, we came up with a 3-day agenda. About 4 hours of sessions, 2 sessions per hour. And we split it into different themes. So we had Thriving Founders the first day, which was focused mainly on how do we really help the entrepreneurs that are part of our programs, or entrepreneurs that we're supporting in some way, shape, or form, to really thrive in a holistic sense. So looking at, you know, wellness from a holistic perspective, also financial sustainability, investment readiness, impact measurement, and really looking at this broad spectrum of founders in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations. And then day 2 is all about thriving organizations. So the actual entrepreneur support organizations themselves. So building a really strong and thriving team and culture, as well as financial sustainability, impact measurement, and as well as, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion implications. And then day 3 was all about the ecosystem as a whole. How can we really remove these sort of barriers to entry, competition mentality, and scarcity mentality that exists in the impact ecosystem, and how do we better share learnings across the entire ecosystem so that we all can benefit from that. And so Colin's going to take us through a little bit of a spotlight of some of the data. We'll go into a little more depth about the actual participant lookbook that he put together, which is an incredible resource that we can, you know, we'll be sharing with you in a screen share. So I'm just going to let Colin kind of speak to this data, this spotlight data, for the next 2 slides.
Yeah, thank you. So this is sort of an overview of who was registered for the event. So in total, we had 32 speakers and 9 panelists. So some of our sessions were just hosted by 1 speaker. Some of them had maybe 2 speakers. Other speakers brought a panel of individuals with them for a bit more of a broad level discussion. So we did have a mix of speakers and panelists. We did separate those out a little bit. And then in total, we had 162 participants. The breakdown of men and women was 59% women, 41% men, but it's important to note that this is related to those who registered. We did run into some issues with our attendance tracking based on the platforms we chose, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Probably one of the biggest lessons learned, I think. So this is actually people who registered for the event itself. It may not be reflective of those who actually participated, but it does kind of line up with what we saw in each session that Sarah and I were in. So it seems to be still relatively reflective. And you can go to the next slide there. Thank you. So this is a breakdown of the locations, so meaning where people were physically based. This is the total of all participants, speakers, panelists. We did break it down further between the different categories in our data lookbook. And then we also looked at the geographic focus of work, so what the area that people are focusing their work on. So where people were based, as you can see, the vast majority was US and Canada with 63%, followed not very closely by Latin America at 10.7. We had Asia at 9.9, Africa at 8.3, and Europe at 7.4. We did look at breaking these down. Obviously, you know, a continent like Asia could very easily be broken down into more subcategories, but given the numbers that we were working with, we just kind of wanted to give a broader sort of overview of where people were based. And then the same thing with the geographic focus of work. The majority of people had a global focus of work at 34.6%, followed by US and Canada, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and a very small portion were Europe. One thing to note with this is that we did have people who encompassed a number of different areas. They weren't necessarily global, but some people may be focused on US and Canada and Latin America, or some combination that wasn't necessarily global. So it's the global one was specific to people who have no particular geographic focus, or they focus on everyone, and then other people were kind of a mix of the other categories.
And one thing to note too with this data, because you'll notice that Europe is really low. And one of the things that will be shifting for next year is that the event was held in August, and our thinking around that was we did not want to compete with the fall convening schedule, which usually kicks off September and goes almost to November sometimes, depending on what areas and specific focus you're looking at. So we did choose August, but of course, as I think most of you know, August is a big vacation period for Europe as well as other regions, but it is pretty classic for Europeans to take the month of August off. So we are going to be shifting the event to probably being in November next year. It's something that we're working on for our team retreat coming up in the next couple of weeks. Or if you all have a specific month or time of year that you have as a suggestion for an event like this, feel free to chime in and let us know. So this is sort of our table of contents. We're going to be going over all the different things that went into planning and developing and running this event, and both pros and cons in terms of team, pricing, agenda, platforms, lookbook, and data. And so one of the things we really wanted to be upfront with everyone on this call about and to share with our community is the actual team investment, because it does take, as I think everyone knows, it takes a lot of time and effort to put on any sort of event. And the way that conveners.org is structured, and is specifically for managing this event, is sort of a very small core team, and then a suite of different types of consultants. So we have a lot of part-time consultants that work on really specific tasks like graphic design, email marketing, and social media. And then we have consultants like Colin and Rena, who are sort of more of the events manager, event coordinator, and registration focus. And they do other things for us as well as helped out on this specific event. And so that's just something to keep in mind in terms of your budget as well as time and the total investment on the team. It definitely, for the day of, it was just Colin and myself. And so it's a huge investment of time. You'll see events manager and event coordinator, that's Colin and myself. You'll see it's a lot of time for that. And then of course, obviously for the communication side with email marketing, that's sort of the third biggest time effort. And a lot of the graphics we had to create from scratch. So that's also why graphic design took a lot of time. And as you'll see from our lookbook, which we also created from scratch, it's the first time we've done a lookbook like this. There's a lot of graphic design and editing and inputting of data that went into that process. But I'm gonna pause because Colin's gonna go over that more. And so pricing. To be perfectly honest, we've never actually technically charged directly for this event ever. The in-person event was free for participants who are also participating in SOCAP, and then we would charge money for those people who weren't participating in SOCAP, but we as commuters.org never really got any sort of revenue profit share from the model. It was kind of something that we did in partnership with SOCAP so that, you know, our staff could go to SOCAP and it's sort of a value add to the ecosystem as a whole. And so this is the first year where we decided to kind of test out the model of pricing, and we had early bird pricing all the way to regular pricing based on just, you know, leading up to the event. And what we found is while some people did purchase early bird tickets, by the time we got to 2 months before the event, we only had 9 people who had actually purchased tickets. And one of the things is we really wanted this event to be a membership driver for us. So we priced the tickets more expensive than our membership was for an annual membership to try and just get more ESOs to be part of our membership community. And while that did work for some, so we had the 9 paid tickets, and then we obviously had some tickets from our membership community and new members who got the entrance to the event for free. We really had to have a hard conversation around, you know, do we do this event at all? Because we had an amazing lineup of speakers, which I'll go through how we created the actual agenda for the event. And Colin will share a little bit, just you can see visually when we go over the lookbook what that agenda looked like for each day. But we decided, you know, based on the speakers and diversity of topics, and we were really excited about, you know, the lineup in the agenda, we wanted to continue moving forward, but we needed to find a way to up the number of registrations. So we did a complete 180, and we went to donation only. So pay what you can model. The only hiccup was when we created that option in Eventbrite for some reason, and I don't know, I can't remember if it's a sort of default with Eventbrite, but Eventbrite basically had 2 options created. One was the donation option, but then it also created a free ticket. And then of course, most people went for the free ticket because why not, right? And didn't actually do any type of donation. A lot of folks did do a donation for the event. So we were really happy that at least for this very, very first iteration of the event, some people did pay for it. And we actually did ask a question in our feedback survey about what was the value created or value add in dollars, US dollars, for an event of this type, and what would people potentially pay in the future to participate in an event like this based on their experience. And on average, I mean, the averages were anywhere from like $200 to $3,000. So the average was about $500 per person in the future. We're not sure what we're going to be doing in terms of pricing for future years, but just wanted to share, you know, a little bit of background information about those decisions and how and why they were made. And so one of the things, since we're a global community and our network, even outside of our membership community, is very global, we had, you know, for everyone doing virtual convening, time zones are a huge struggle. And so I'll go over that in a second, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the open process. So we copied and were inspired by SOCAP's open call for proposals for sessions. And so basically what we did is we marketed a form that anyone could fill out anywhere on the globe to sort of, you know, pitch an idea for a session. So topic, theme, title, description, what they would like to get out of the session, what type of session it was, all of that information. If you want to see our form to look at that, to do the open process for yourselves, let us know. And we're more than happy to share that with you, just to use as a template for your event. And what we did after that is kind of look through all of the submissions, which we got a lot of submissions. We actually had to put people on a waiting list, and we're able to include all of the sessions into the final agenda because we did not want to overload the agenda either with the number of participants that we did have leading up to the event, although it like double, triple when we got closer to the event. But I think two sessions per hour block was more than enough. based on the overall engagement that we had per session, which we'll get into a little bit later. But so we had the forum to gather all of the data. We also had training sessions for the facilitators, but of course it depends on who shows up. And I think in the future, we really would like to do more training around our particular style of facilitation and engagement to create really like way more highly engaged, highly participatory sessions. A lot of the sessions were led really beautifully and done really well. Others were a little more dry and a little more traditional panel, which is not really our style, but understanding how to do a session and facilitate a session that's really engaging and highly participatory is hard if you're doing it for the first time virtually, or if that's just sort of your style and what you're used to. It's hard to get out of that mold, right? So that's sort of a lesson learned for us in terms of the facilitator-led sessions. And we also had everyone use their own Zoom accounts unless they did not already have a Zoom account, and in which case we would give them our Zoom, which we only had to do for a handful of people. And that was really great because it enabled everyone to kind of manage their own Zoom sessions and their own time, and not have to like manage multiple Zoom rooms ourselves, because we've run into a lot of issues with that in the past of, oh, the Zoom room's occupied because someone else is in it. And there's been a lot of hiccups with that we've had in the past. Just internally as a team. And one of the only drawback with that is getting the recordings from facilitators once their session was complete. I believe we got most of them in the end, but there was a little bit of chasing that had to be done for some people to get that information. As well as, I put in here, we need to, in the future, add more questions to the form to get more data ahead of time before people are actually confirmed, just because for the lookbook, we also had to chase down a lot of speakers, presenters. A lot of people added people at the last minute or changed people. And so there was a lot of that gathering of data that we had to chase in order to inform what the lookbook would look like, to be able to share that with all the participants leading up to the event. And then time zones, we did, again, two sessions per time block, which was an hour long. We did one orientation session at the beginning of each day and one networking block in the middle each day, which for an hour. We found that most people were really excited and joined the first orientation session, and then for the other 2 days, not so much. And same with the networking. I think in the future, what we're going to be doing, because we opted to do sort of later morning, 10, 11 a.m. Pacific time to early afternoon Pacific time, and just do back-to-back sessions. One of the reasons we opted for that is sometimes we've seen at other virtual events, when you do separate out the session blocks, sometimes you end up losing folks, whereas if it's back to back to back and people book it on their calendars, they tend to stay and engage and interact more. With us, we definitely saw more participation in the early morning, well, quote unquote, early morning, and also later afternoon, evening, especially on Wednesday, actually. We had a lot of participation in the later, we did a later shift of the time blocks to include evening as well. We saw more engagement for those sessions as well. So I think based on the engagement data that we do have for the times and sessions that we had across the 3 days, we're probably going to be doing an early Pacific time, like 7, 8 a.m. time block, maybe two sessions in the morning, or two session blocks. So that would be 4 sessions in the morning, and then do a time block in the evening as well. If anyone has any sort of best practices or things that you've seen and want to share in the chat or unmute at any time, please feel free, or you can even wait till the end and we'll have that space as well. And so I'm going to pass it to Colin to talk a little bit about some of the platforms, and I'll talk about, the other half of platforms as well.
So like Sarah mentioned, we used Zoom for all of our sessions. It was a mix of our Zoom account and the host Zoom account. The only time we created them is if the host asked us to or didn't have their own. A few things that you'll want to consider there is most Zoom accounts, you can only have 1 session at a time, which is why it was beneficial for us to have the hosts provide theirs, because we had 2 sessions happening at a time. When you are having other people provide you with it, there is a bit more effort required in terms of collecting the information, both the Zoom links and the recordings after the fact. It's also a little bit of an additional challenge just to make sure that you have everything correct. Zoom links they all look the same. So you kind of want to make sure you have a way to organize those really efficiently. Normally if they're all in our account, I can just open up our Zoom account and look at the full list and check all the meeting IDs, whereas that's not really an option when you're dealing with other people's Zoom accounts. The other things to consider are things like limits on the number of attendees. If you have one on your account, there is like a larger meeting add-on that you can add to your account to have up to 500. Otherwise, I believe the limit on most accounts is 100 people. So those are just things you really just want to make sure you understand the specifics of your Zoom account and what you can and cannot do with it, and then have other people provide theirs if that's an option. The next was Canva, which we use quite a lot. I'm a big fan of Canva. I'm certainly not a graphic designer myself, but we did work with a graphic designer who did a lot of templates. Canva is very, very easy to use, very easy to learn. I have found there's also a lot of information available about it online if you're not really sure. Generally speaking, anytime I've asked myself, been in Canva thinking, okay, I wish I could do this, there's usually a way to do it. You just kind of, if you look it up, generally you can find it quite easily. So we did have a lot of those templates created. I will show you guys the lookbook, which is the biggest one that we used Canva for. Only really one setback with that, which I'll talk about once we get it open. But otherwise, it's a really great tool. Google Calendar was our biggest lesson learned, I think, at least from my perspective. So we had originally intended for all of our sessions to be Google Calendar invites and to send those out. And I did a couple of weeks before the event think to myself, I wonder if there's a limit on how many people you can invite. And so I looked it up and I quickly found a page on Google's website that indicated that the maximum was 10,000 people. So I thought, we're good. We don't have anything to worry about. What I now know is when you look at the bottom of that page in small print, the actual number is based on your calendar activity. 10,000 is the absolute maximum, but Google does monitor for suspicious behavior to make sure people aren't abusing it. So with our Google Calendar, we typically only use those invites for our internal team and the host of our meetings that we have throughout the year, like this one. So we don't normally invite all of the participants because like you guys did today, people usually register through our website. So because we normally only have 5 to 6 people, when I tried to add hundreds of people to a Google Calendar invite, it would not let me. So about a week before the event, maybe even a bit less, we realized that this is not going to work. Fortunately, we were already creating our landing page, which I'm just going to share the link to in the chat in case anybody wanted to have a look at it. And so we were able to use that as a bit of a workaround where we shared all of the information, but definitely don't recommend Google Calendar for a larger scale event. One thing that would be an alternative option, it would be a bit tricky if you're using a mix of different Zoom accounts, but you can set up Zoom events that you have to register in advance. And that would allow you to track who registered for which session, what ones were people most interested in, who registered most for which time slots. So this is one of the biggest challenges we faced during, but also after the event, because it's been quite difficult for us to say for certain, which sessions were most popular. We have total numbers that Sarah and I just kind of shared with each other in Slack during each session while we were in them, but we can't really see like which ones garnered the most interest right from the get-go and who registered for them. So next was the WordPress landing page, which was our savior in the end, I think. So this is a page that we used where we shared all of the information, the agenda for each day. There was a separate little drop down for each separate day, and people could view the title of the sessions, the host, their company, and a description. And then we also posted all of the Zoom links that people would need in there. And then after the event, we were able to use that same landing page to post all of the resources. So all the session recordings, slide decks, and then any other resources that the hosts shared with us. We did send out an email at the end of each day to request any resources. So like Sarah mentioned, I think like I already mentioned as well, a little bit of prompting required when other people are handling the recordings and stuff. Most people were really great at getting them to us really quickly. But we did send out that email at the end of the day just to say, hey, could you please send us your recordings and your session resources? Because we wanted those up there as quickly as possible while people are still engaged with the event and still interested in it. And for those who might have attended one session but want to see what happened in the other. And then we used Slack between Sarah and I quite a lot. I also am a big fan of Slack, really good for internal communication. We would just have it open and kind of message back and forth about our sessions and anything that we needed from each other. A couple of things to consider if you are using Slack for these types of things. It might not be ideal if you're someone who does not enjoy having multiple tabs open. I think a lot of people would have a heart attack if they saw how many tabs are open on my computer most of the time. So it doesn't bother me, but some people would. The other thing I would recommend is to make sure if you're using Slack during a meeting, if you're hosting it or you're speaking, is to make sure your Slack sounds are muted, because you will often hear that little ping noise when someone messages you, and then you can get caught that you're talking about stuff if you're talking with other people in the meeting. So you just want to be careful with that. And with that, I will pass it back to Sarah, who can touch a little bit better than I can on the last few.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. So the other 4 platforms, and as you can see, a lot of platforms went into the creation and execution of this event. So one of the things we wanted to sort of host or replicate was that special networking connection space that you would get in an in-person event, going to get coffee or the lounge outside of sessions. And we created using Wonder, which Colin can put that in the chat later, the link to the Wonder page. Wonders are really just easy to use, super user-friendly, free tool. And it basically creates sort of a desktop version of that live networking feeling, at least I would say. So you have a little avatar, you take a picture of yourself, you can move your avatar around the screen. And basically as you get closer to another person, it creates these conversation bubbles that you can have multiple people, I believe up to like 50, maybe even 100 people per conversation bubble. And you can see and hear everyone. So you can see their actual faces. So you're not just an avatar wandering in space, and you can hear them. And if you want to leave, you can exit the conversation bubble and go to another conversation. It also allows you to create different conversation rooms. So we had sort of like the picnic tables like you have at SoCap, where people would go just to meet one-on-one randomly. And then we had different thematic rooms every single day to kind of try and group participants in different ways during our networking session and our orientation session. It was just a great way for people to meet, if they wanted to, meet with other people working in the same geographic area or even like the same sector focus. They were able to do that. So that's Wonder. It's a really great tool. There are other free tools as well that work really nicely too. Wonder, I think, is the least in terms of bells and whistles. You can also present within the conversation bubbles. You can have presentations and share screens, and then you can also present to the entire group of people through a broadcasting mechanism that they allow for as well. And they have chat, both for private chat and for finding specific people that are in the networking session to chat with them one-on-one. And you can also create private conversation bubbles. So if you meet up with someone and you're in a one-on-one or even multi-person conversation bubble and you're like, oh, hey, we don't want anyone else in here, you can lock it so that no one else can join, which is something you just have to make sure people know not to do if you want everything to be flowing. And if they want to do their own, private conversation bubbles, they can, but not to lock the group ones, because we had someone accidentally lock a conversation bubble at one point, which was pretty funny. So that's Wonder. Eventbrite is the hosting platform that we use for registrations. It's really great just in terms of being able to, capture information about the attendees, have a sort of event page that hosts information. You can, charge people if you're doing paid tickets versus donation versus free. And then the only hiccup that I mentioned was that it created the free ticket and donation option, which in the future, if we do the pay what you can model again, we're going to be just having the donation ticket, asking everyone to at least, do some sort of donation. Mighty Networks is a totally new platform that we're using for our membership community, and we decided to test it out for this event as well. So this allows you to have a space that is sort of like live engagement before, during, and after any event. It is an interesting platform. We really enjoy using it for our membership community because you can create different groups. So you can have different conversation groups if you want. You can even host multiple events. You can even charge for tickets on Mighty Networks. It's a really cool interactive way to just share resources and questions and conversations with the entire community. The only drawback with Mighty Networks is if you have, like we do, we have our communers.org Mighty Networks platform, or platform. And then within that, we had the Accelerating the Accelerators as a group. The only problem is you have to join the main group of communers.org before you can then join any of the internal groups, if that makes sense. And so we had a lot of people in the main communers.org sort of Mighty Networks universe, and they did not make it over to the Accelerating the Accelerators group. So they missed some of the communications, which we also sent out via MailChimp. But that's just sort of something that we need to tweak in the future, is actually, if we do an event and we're using Mighty Networks, is to actually have it be an event instead of a group. And if you all have questions about Mighty Networks, I can have one-on-one conversations about that later, because it's like a whole platform. We really enjoy it, but lots of lessons learned there. And then MailChimp, we just use for external communications. We really like it. We use it for our newsletters, and it's great because you can schedule things ahead of time and create an entire content calendar to post things and have things sent out. So I'm just going to pause and look at the chat really quickly. Yeah, exactly, Brett. So the thing is, like, either creating a unique Mighty Networks, platform or user group just for Accelerating the Accelerators, or what we might do in the future is do it as an event and charge through there. So yeah, and also tagging, Marty, that's another thing, is people did not use the tagging function. I think it's a newer platform for a lot of people, or a lot of people haven't ever heard of it before. And so there wasn't sort of, we could have done more orientation around how to use Mighty Networks. In general, as you can see, I think we used too many platforms. And so we're going to be scaling way back for the next iteration of Accelerating the Accelerators in terms of platform use, just to make it super easy to find all the information and where to engage. And so we just have to kind of figure out what the secret sauce is for engagement, and making sure people know where to go when and where to access information and be able to connect with one another. Because that's one of our biggest things with this event, is the magic happens when you connect with other participants. And so we wanted to create as many places for interaction and engagement as possible during and outside of the sessions themselves. So that's why we chose to use multiple platforms. All right, Colin, I'm going to stop screen share because we're going to go over the lookbook and a little bit more of the data, and just be able to share with you all this amazing resource that Colin put together for many hours working and chasing people down and graphic design work. So Colin, and one of the reasons, I'll just say before you get started and get set up, Colin, one of the reasons why we decided to do a lookbook was, again, in this spirit of being able to make sure, everyone knew who was going to be at the event and attending versus like speakers and other participants, and just create a mechanism to make it more easy for people to be able to find one another and see who's going to be going and connect. And also, to, in all honesty, to create sort of an artifact that could be used for potential sponsorship and funding in future years. Since we've never done this event before virtually, we didn't really have anything to go off of in terms of sponsorships and other of those types of conversations. And now we have an actual artifact from the event itself. So I'll let Colin dive in here, and feel free to post questions in the chat.
Sarah, can you just confirm that you see the lookbook and not my other screen? Okay, cool. There's a green box around both for some reason. So so this is the lookbook. So this was Combination of a number of things. It was a way, at the top we highlighted our partners for the event. We also shared the agenda for the event in it. So we broke it down into the 3 separate days. One thing I would suggest considering if you're designing agendas for your own event, you will notice on some of these, I think there's some like various sizes of fonts because I started to run out of room with the more people. So just some smaller, relatively unimportant, but important to me, things that, I would probably consider next time. Just making sure you quite literally have the space that you need. Like I said, I kind of worked with a template here and did my best with it. But we did get a really great template from our graphic designer who did quite a great job with it. So we had the 3 days of agenda here. As you can see, we started each day with our welcome and community connections, and then we would have our sessions. These were the sessions that happened at the same time as one another. Then we had our networking breaks, and then we would have 2 sessions after that. So people could kind of quickly look at this to get an overview of their day. We did send this out at the beginning of the event, and then we sent out an updated copy at the end of the event. So people could kind of reference this every day and have kind of a physical copy of what the day was going to look like. We then started it with our speakers. So we did separate it into the 3 categories, our speakers and then our panelists and then the participants, with each of those sections being organized alphabetically. So for each one, we highlighted a headshot, their name, their organization, their role, and their geographic focus. And then this little pin here is actually where they're based, or at least loosely. I tried very hard to get it as precise as possible, but it wasn't always easy. And then their company website. The biggest challenge I think that we faced with this was the gathering of the information. Next time we would include any of the information we want to capture, we would capture it upon registration. So Eventbrite, which we used for the registrations, you can put in custom fields. So, things ask their organization, their role, their geographic focus. So just consider any information you're going to want for the event, try to get it as quickly as possible. And from the source, it's much easier. The vast majority of these I found by Googling people and LinkedIn and sleuthing on the internet and trying to find them. And then in the end, for the ones that we couldn't find, when the event started, we sent out an email saying, here's the current copy of the lookbook. If you're not in it and you'd like to be, here's all the information that we're going to need from you in order to include you. The challenge that then presented is there's no way in Canva, it doesn't automatically sort this for me by alphabetical. So you would have to kind of highlight and drag people down and insert a new one. There was a lot of playing around with it. I did actually kind of enjoy it. But it was quite a bit of effort, whereas if we had gathered all that information from the beginning, still quite a bit of effort would go into creating it, but you could create one copy that you're confident you have the information you need in it, and you shouldn't need to make too many edits in the future. So the rest of it looks very much the same. We have our speakers, then a little further down. Once I get past all 32 of them, you'll see our 9 panelists. We also put some Sarah's contact information in here. So obviously we didn't want to share people's private contact information in this lookbook, but it is a resource that people could use and refer to and say, I had this really great conversation with this person in, this session today. What was their name? They could find them and then reach out to Sarah if they wanted to connect with them. And then Sarah would reach out to that person and get permission to connect those 2 people with one another. And then we have our panelists, same thing. And then again, we have the participants down here. So again, I think this was a very valuable resource for people. It was definitely worth the time that went into it because it's, one of the things that you miss with virtual events is that networking opportunity and that opportunity to make those one-on-one connections. So if, there was someone that you wished you had that opportunity with, you can kind of find their information in here. Any questions about this before I stop sharing it with everybody? Okay, so I will stop that. So then the next one that we created, we did just a quick event data lookbook. So I'll share that one quickly with you as well. It's not nearly as long. Find what screen I have it in. Says you guys can see it, but I can't see it. Okay, here we go. So we used a very similar template for this one as well. And then this was just sort of a recap of the data that we had for the event. So same information that we shared with you guys earlier, the number of speakers, panelists, participants, the gender. And then we did the locations overview. So this is for everyone. This is a little bit of a further breakdown. This is speakers and panelists. So once again, majority US and Canada. Numbers a little bit different than the participants. There was a higher proportion of speakers and panelists in Europe than there was participants. Participants was only 3.8, but the numbers for US and Canada were kind of hovered around 60, no matter what way you looked at it. And then the geographic focus of work, we did the same thing, broke it down specifically based on the speakers and panelists, and then the participants. Again, you can see speakers and panelists, the vast majority of those had a global focus of work, whereas, sorry, the participants of the Zoom meeting are in my way. So I have the 30% was US and Canada for the participants themselves. And then we did do a breakdown of individual sessions. Again, it was hard to get concrete numbers for interest in the sessions because of the platforms that we used and the troubles that we had. But you will notice you can kind of see which, these are organized in order of when they happened. So you can really see what time slots were the least popular. Like Sarah said, early morning was quite popular. It was those like early afternoon slots that we kind of had much lower engagement with. And then on day 2, we had a bit of a spike in the evening again and saw kind of a similar pattern on day 3 as well. And if any of you would like copies of this, certainly let us know, or if you have any specific questions about it, I'm certainly happy to answer them. But other than that, I will stop this one now as well. So biggest lessons learned from creating those lookbooks is just, I can't stress it enough, is collect the information that you want right at the beginning. Those custom fields, and chances are whatever program you use for your event RSVP should probably have some option for custom fields. So just use that as your opportunity to gather that information so that you don't have to kind of go scrambling for it later. And with that, I will pass it back over to Sarah.
Awesome. So that's sort of our general overview of, why we did what we did, how we built it out, how we managed it, what worked well, what didn't work well. And we wanted to kind of open it up to any sort of questions, or even, I know Brett and Greg both presented and participated. If you guys have any sort of feedback or insights from your experience specifically, or if anyone else here attended sessions, to kind of speak to that as well and just open it up. Or if any of you have also done sort of multi-day virtual events on a low budget, low staff, and want to just share your findings, we're going to open up the floor now and stop talking.
Clarifying question on the pricing.
Jan, I'm sorry, I missed that. I heard pricing. That was it.
Yeah, I've got a clarifying question about it. Was it that you all started with like because you talked a little bit about early bird tickets and how like things were originally priced higher than membership, but then early bird tickets offered discounts, but then not a lot of people signed up for early bird tickets, and then you switched to the donation only model. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so what we did is we started promoting the event fairly early in the year, even before we had specific, agenda speakers, et cetera, but just to get excitement and had the early bird pricing available then. And then as we got to midway, so I would say May, June, we turned off early bird pricing and offered it as like the full pricing, which was almost $400, I believe, for the whole 3 days. Early bird pricing was always priced a little bit more than actually becoming a member, because our lowest fee on the sliding scale for membership is $250. So even for early bird pricing, it was a little below $300 for people to just either buy a ticket or they could choose to become members. And we had a handful of people who chose to become members and they got a free ticket to the event. And we had that nine people who actually paid a full ticket to go. And what we did is once we switched to the donation only model, we did reach out to everyone who had purchased a early bird ticket. We didn't have anyone who purchased a full price ticket, But we did reach out to everyone asking if they wanted, partial full refund, or if they wanted to give it to us sort of as their donation. And no one, as far as I know to date, has asked for their refund. They decided to all participate in giving that as their donation to the event itself.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying all that.
So I know it came up earlier in terms of like how many concurrent sessions to have at a time. And I do think that there's, having presented it, you want to have a kind of a good capacity of energy and attendance in each session. So that feels like the driver to me. So if you're going to have 50 people attending, then it might make sense to go as many as 3 or 4 concurrent sessions when you're doing those. But if your attendance is low and you see it waning, or it's kind of hard to, feel on the fly, but, to the extent that you're able to, then maybe you consider less sessions, because ultimately those sessions are going to be as good as the people who attend them as much as the people who are presenting. And so in order to create that energy, you kind of just got to balance those scales.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, and also too, Marty, to your point, it's really hard to compile an agenda that's going to be equally like engaging and energizing throughout the entire day, especially when they're back to back sessions. And so one of the things is, because we did see a lot of session themes that were similar, it's like, do you group the session themes that are similar together and make people choose? We chose to actually separate them out throughout the day. So we would have like a wellness focus in the morning session and a wellness topic in the afternoon, evening. They were taking it from like different perspectives, and they were different speakers / facilitators. But, one of our questions, which we probably won't know the answer to, is that also why some of the sessions were not as fully attended, because they were slightly similar as well in topic or theme or focus?
I do think, conferences are overwhelming. Like for me, I always take a nap before the cocktail hour because I'm so fried by like 4 p.m. that like I just can't do that evening activities. And I went to this one Buddhist thing that was virtual, and she had us do a walking meditation, and then we had an hour for lunch, and then we had another thing, and she kept breaking it up. And I had scheduled a work meeting at the end, and I said to them like, oh, I'm going to be in a day long, and I might be fried, and I might bail on you guys. But it was so spacious that I felt great and I felt energized, and I really just think it's like, very kind of workaholic, and the particularly American disease that people kind of over program. And I think that that's true, when we were in person. And I think we're still struggling with that a lot in the virtual world. And I see people setting things up, and then everybody gets fried and they bail. So I'm just always like trying to push people in the direction of, let's make it spacious and let's have downtime and give people different activities. And, the neuroscience is definitely telling us we need playtime if we're going to go back and work or learn, for sure.
Yeah, definitely, Maureen. That's a big lesson learned for us, as well as I think we are going to be separating them out. And I think we are going to be keeping, smaller, like two max 3 sessions per hour, just because also too, it divides the number of participants that show up each day and for each session hour, which we saw, we had enough sessions to do 3 per hour. But then when we looked at the number of participants and knowing like, at least a 50% drop, based on RSVPs of attendees who actually show up to things, we cut way back to just 2 sessions per block. And I think too, it's again, like that being overextended feeling as well. So thanks, Marty. Greg, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I just wanted to chime in real quick, and if I'm repeating anything that's already been said, forgive me, but Sarah, you mentioned just the perspective of the facilitator. And I just wanted to throw out there, and it actually runs along with what a lot of what's already been said. in my case, I had an hour-long session, and man, an hour runs so quickly. So, you know, simply from kind of the very humble tips from my perspective on how to do, you know, an engaging hour-long session well. Again, it runs so fast. My humble, you know, kind of frankly, just lessons learned from that was, you know, don't try to fit too much into an hour. Keep the theme really simple and basic. When I say basic, just kind of like concise, because I think there is an opportunity to explore even concise things really wonderfully and deeply in a short amount of time. So that's, again, my humble thoughts. Not sure if you have any reaction to that, or if anybody else has a reaction, but that's my input.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, too, also, and I put it in the chat as well, but just for those who are watching the recording, one of the things that we looked at, even when we were compiling the agenda, because a lot of people had put in, you know, oh, we want to do this in 30 minutes or 90 minutes or 60 minutes. And so after communicating to everyone that like the agenda flowed better for what we were trying to do just with 60-minute sessions, I think for next year, lesson learned for next year is to be able to offer different types of session blocks. So maybe doing some working group sessions that are more 90 minutes, and maybe even some quick, you know, Ignite talk type of presentation styles for 30 minutes. I think that also helps manage the energy flows better too. So thank you.
I'd like to offer kind of my perspective as a audience member, and kind of like piggybacking off of what everybody's been saying so far. First of all, it was, for having such a small team, it didn't feel like a small conference. Like, it felt like a much bigger conference than it was run by, which was great. And then I had another conference like the next week that I was joined that was a huge conference, and it honestly felt like in comparison to. And I think one of the takeaways was I could only really do one full day and had to kind of drop the other days. But then also going off of kind of like the puzzling together, I know there were some sessions that I missed, but I was really happy. Like, one of them, I kind of forewent the, you know, like the sexy one for kind of the smaller one. I'm really happy I did. It ended up being like a really great session. And I think there was like maybe like 4 or 5 of us. It was so small, but it was great because there's a lot of like one-on-one interaction, and it was really I don't know, just very action oriented. And it was much more of a discussion, which was great. And then actually the conference I went to the following week, one of the organizers from that talk was actually an audience member in that session, and we got paired up, and I was like, oh, hey. So that was pretty cool. And I think that's kind of a benefit in a way, kind of like an unspoken benefit of the smaller stuff, is that you do get to have more of those meaningful interactions rather than just, you know, a square and a screen. Yeah, I thought it was really great. And I did enjoy the day I was able to attend, but yeah, I wasn't able to attend any other, just because, like, you know, especially with digital conferences, like if you're going someplace, you're really devoting that time to going. But then like the multi-day stuff does get almost exhausted because you have to, you know, run your business still. So just my takeaways.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah. And that's something that we're still kind of figuring out and thinking through of, you know, if we do multi-day, how many days, or we do one full day of programming. I think we'll probably still do multi-days, but maybe we just do 2 instead of 3 to like decrease the burnout. So that's definitely there's a lot of lessons learned there that we haven't cracked that nut yet. And we're going to be talking about that during our team retreat planning this month and next month.
Great. And then I also think this whole session right here is very valuable for the rest of us who have not done something digital before. So like this in of itself is almost like a very great extension of it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Ian, did you want to put in your 2 cents before we wrap up here?
I thought that this is on your, I thought this was 90 minutes. Sorry, I had a call earlier. A couple of quick things. So awesome show. Thank you. As someone who's familiar with people thinking that we're a much larger organization and we host events, and as some of you know, I have hosted something like 30 mini sessions over the last 3 weeks. The things that struck me, one is thank you for trying the time zone swap, right? Because it's a global effort and that's hard. Like, I don't think that works well, but I can't think of a better way to do it. So that's not a criticism. That's just like, it felt weird to, but like, I get, like, I try and do that and it's hard and it's, I'm not quite sure how to solve that. The other is, and you're familiar with a lot of platforms in your team, the challenge of Zoom chat. So if there's a platform out there where you can do and track one-on-one chats, because one of the things that works about online conferences is you can have the hallway conversations without interrupting the speaker during the speaker. Like, you know, you're talking to the person next to you in the audience about what they just heard, but it's not interrupting anybody else. But that doesn't really, like in Zoom, you have to, it all just comes in one giant thread. And if there was a platform out there where if you and I or Greg and I are having conversations, there's a way for me to see those as opposed to them being part of this giant stream of text that's coming down in Zoom. I don't know, because I mean, there are ones like spatial chat and all that, but those have a different or Wander or whatever, different presentation approach that doesn't necessarily work as well for them. And also you don't want something that people haven't used or that's, that isn't just plug and play. So there are two things that you tried to do and you did it as well as anyone else I've seen, but that doesn't mean it went off particularly well. So that's not a criticism. That's just like, these are things that would be great to improve. I just don't know how. Yeah, I think that's what I got for now.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian, for that feedback. Colin, I know you just joined us. We're kind of wrapping up the conversation here because a lot of people had to jump, but just sharing, participant and speaker experiences, lessons learned to wrap up the presentation, but we can definitely share out our presentation slides and all of the data that was collected with everyone. We'll be doing a recap email that's going to be sent out early next week with all those links and information. So, as well as the recording to this video. Any last questions or comments before we wrap today, since I know a lot of people had to hop early?
Keep doing what you're doing. I think case studies are so important, and like they're the best way for people to learn is just to see what somebody else has done. Like they're so helpful. I think they're so underrated.
Yeah, definitely, Ashley. That's why we decided this was such an important call to host and be really open and honest about what worked and what didn't and what we're thinking about for next year. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time to join us. With that, I'm going to give you guys back the time. So we're all busy and the conversation is dying down, but thank you all so much who were able to join, even to those who had to hop early and those who had to come late because of other commitments and obligations. But thank you so much for your commitment to this community, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks, everyone. Bye.